Hello again, this is episode 2 of Game Asset Sculpting, and we're doing a plank. In this episode we'll work on the more detailed levels and finishing off the sculpt, ready for baking. Okay, so we've got our wooden plank to this stage, and I'm thinking this is a good time to up the detail level. So at the moment we've been working on a resolution of 10 in the constant detail, and the question is when to go up the detail levels. Now as you can see here, we can still see a lot of the topology as we sculpt, and if I want to go in and maybe with my crease brush enabled do a slightly more creased edge here and start adding details around this knot, you can see that it's difficult for me to bring out any details, and that's the time you need to up the detail level. You'll get used to that with experience, and sometimes you may up the detail level too early and you'll get slight issues. I'll show you what I mean. So I'll up the resolution to 80, so way too high, and start creasing, and luckily my computer's still able to cope with this. So I've put some detail in. You can see it kind of looks out of place at the moment, and when I go to smooth it out, it doesn't smooth out as much as it smooths out over here. So to get rid of the detail level by smoothing, you've got too much topology, and it is smoothing the topology out, but it's not taking away the larger detail aspects like it might if I smoothed up here. So if you go too detailed too early, you'll find it difficult to adjust your shape. So I'm just undoing all this, and I'll put it back down to 20. And it's worth trying it out and see what that looks like. That looks good. I like to usually go up 2 levels. So start at something like 10, depending on the size of your model. And you have to test it out because the scale of your model does affect the resolution of the dyne topo. And then I like to go double that resolution and then double again quite often. In this case, I think we can go a touch higher because I can still just about see the topology there, and I'm quite comfortable with the shape. Although having said that, what you might want to do, because I've done 3 of these planks before for my small scene, I might change this one slightly so it's a bit more warped and distorted. So whilst the detail level is still low, at 10, I can get my grab tool and start pulling it around and distorting the shape slightly. Now it's worth mentioning that I'm using the grab tool rather than the snake hook tool. I don't want to create any new topology. I'm happy with what's there already, and the grab tool is much easier to use, and it just moves your topology around. I'm also smoothing it out occasionally with the smooth brush by holding down Shift. It does depend on what you want to use this for. So if you want them to be able to interlock to make a building, then too distorted like this, you're going to get lots of holes in between. But for something like fence posts or the odd one that's really misshapen, it should work quite nicely. So there we go, I've distorted it, but I've got to tidy up a little bit. So I'll go back to my crease brush and go in and just tidy up these edges a bit, using the smooth brush there and creasing in. Still got my mirror turned on in the Z axis, of course, and just following the grain through to the edges. And if the detail level was higher, it wouldn't have such an influence, the smooth tool. As you can see there, the smooth tool has a big influence on these edges and it pushes them right in, but if the detail level was higher, it wouldn't work so well. I'm just using the crease tool a bit more to make it thicker. Now I'm not particularly happy with this end bit. Remember Alt F to zoom into an area, and I'm just going to get the draw brush to thicken it out and smooth it out. And I'm just thinking about how the grain goes, so I'm actually going to cut it off about here, and then it can sort of warp round like this. They look a bit like fingers at the moment, so it's not so great. Remember to go back to your reference images if you think, actually, how would that work at the end there? And I'm now looking at this one here, and I can see they've got sort of pointed edges and they're not so finger-like. So that's why it's useful to have several reference images so you can get a good idea of how it should naturally look. I'm always moving around my object to see what it looks like in 3D, because you can be sculpting away here, and if you're straight onto it, it's difficult to see how deep you've gone, so you need to move around it, pressing Alt F regularly to center around that point to move around it and see what it looks like. Okay, still looking a bit finger-like, so I'll tidy that up a bit. There we go, that's a bit better, I think. And perhaps less fingerish on the other end. Occasionally what you have to look out for, if you start sometimes going in and out of object mode turns Dyn Topo off, so you might find you haven't got enough resolution to play with, so make sure that's ticked there. Just watch out for that, it can catch you out sometimes. Okay, so there we go, ready to move on I think to the next detail level, so let's go up to 20 and let's just quickly see what that looks like. And with my crease brush, that's not too bad. I can still see some of the topology, so I might actually go higher. This is a fairly basic model, so I've gone to 25. It's a fairly basic model, so I can probably afford only 2 detail levels in this case. Let's just see what that's like when we smooth it out. It still has quite a lot of influence, the smooth. And let's just quickly see what it looks like with smooth shading. So that's what you'll end up with in terms of the model, and we're zoomed in a fair way. Maybe I'll go up just a touch more to 30 and see how that works. So again, I'm testing it out, smoothing it out, and let's see what it looks like with smooth shading. That's pretty reasonable. So I'm kind of jumping a level in this case by only having 2 stages. Usually I like to have 3, but that would be for really detailed models. And sometimes you'll even have 4. Okay, so let's keep working on this. For the most part now I'm going to be working with the crease brush, and I could go in and start creasing these areas and just generally working on it. But what might be a good idea is to do a detailed flood fill of the resolution of 30. So I'll come down here, do a detailed flood fill, and I'll explain why I'm doing this in a second. And we can see it's worked because I've smoothed out there and it's much more detailed. We're still a fairly low resolution really at 180,000 tries. So this should be fine for most graphics cards and computers. Now because I've done that, I can set my smooth brush to a lower strength, put my brush up with F, and just quickly smooth out these big areas so it's not so blocky. And it might be a bit too high in strength, but you can judge that for yourself. Basically what you're trying to avoid is changing the shape too much, and just smooth it out so there's no blockiness in your model. And also that will help us to see what sort of level we're finishing off on. If I go to smooth shading again, it's not looking too bad. And as we're only doing 2 lots of detail level, I'm going to put it up to 40 because the face count is still very low. So we should be fine with that, and I'm happy with my shape. So let's put that up to 40. And I'm going to do another detailed flood fill and just smooth it out. There we go. Now let's get back to our crease brush and start modeling. I'm holding Control to pull out edges and just brushing normally to indent. Now when I get to here, the ends here, you can see that because the mirror is still turned on, it looks a bit strange when I brush, and it creates a perfect mirror and it's going to look a tiny bit too uniform. So I'm going to save the sides and ends for last, and then I can turn mirror off and make them look a little bit less uniform. Gives it more character that way. Now because we're on this sort of detail level, it might be worth putting, and we're doing the finer details of our plank, it might be worth going to the matte cap. So press N to get this toolbar and then click on matte cap, and you can see that we've got a material on it that gives us a better idea of the shape we're looking at. And you can see that this one sticks out too far. And I'm having to smooth a fair bit because I'm at a high detail level in order to get that out. I think the strength of my crease brush is fairly high. As you can see, it's making quite harsh divots, and that's fine early on, but at this stage with the detail we can turn it down because we're trying to affect it less. And that's a bit too low now. Yeah, that's about right. Do remember to keep looking at your reference images. For these notches that are in the wood, and for any sort of notches you do, this might be on armour and so forth, I'll just centre there with Alt F. I'm creasing in, but I also want to bring out these edges as well with the Control key so that it gives it more emphasis. I might even go to my Sculpt Draw brush and cut in a bit more there as well. So hold Control down and smooth out any areas that seem to be going wrong. This is going a bit strange because I've got the mirror turned on, so it's trying to mirror it across there. So just for now, I'm going to turn the mirror off in the Z axis, hold Control down, you can see it's digging in fine now. Fine-ish anyway. And also, if you get these sort of problems as well, it's not quite changing the shape, you can actually turn the resolution down. Dig in a bit, smooth out. That's why I quite like constant detail for this sort of thing. So now I'll put it back up to 40. 40 might be a touch high at this stage, but it seems to be working. If you're struggling and you can't seem to smooth things out correctly, then go down a level and just save 40 for the very last stages. Back to my crease brush, define this crease a bit more and make sure the edges stand out like that. I'm being fairly random with my crease brush, but I am following some sort of pattern and I am looking at my reference images as well. So you can see these sort of knots here and these notches, but my grain generally follows a wavy pattern that follows the wood. Now at the moment it's looking a touch blobby rather than woody, so it's sort of looking very even in terms of its lumpiness, and that's because I've not been using the kind of pinch option, which is pulling it out with the Control key. So let's go to the edges and start doing that. I'm going to make my brush slightly bigger and give it more sort of structure. It's best for these sort of shapes, organic things, not to go in too straight a lines, so I'm waving them around a bit, but it is still giving that structure that it needs. That's worked fairly well. Obviously I'm not doing the sides yet, like I said, I'm waiting to turn symmetry off for that. Back to a smaller brush, and let's just pull out some of this with holding the Control key to give it that structure rather than blobbiness. Just following the shape. Press Alt F to center around certain areas. My aim isn't to go too realistic, it's more a sort of cartoony look that I'm after. I think that will help you learn at the moment, because we're just trying to get used to the tools for the moment. You can try and go realistic if you like, but that can sometimes hinder you because you can spend ages trying to get a realistic look, when sometimes it's best to move on to different things, learn different techniques, and then come back to the hyper-realistic look, in my opinion. Some people kind of get caught up in the detail work with their pieces, when really they need to be practicing just forms and shapes. But this is starting to look okay now. Just watch out for sort of blank spots like down here where there's no grain at all. Just it looks a bit lifeless, so just add a tiny bit there with a small brush. And to be fair, that could be for the next detail level perhaps. Last couple of bits that I'm going to do. I notice in some of my reference images there's sort of almost splinters that stick out, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig into here like this. I might be on too high a detail level to do this, to be fair. I'm just going to go down a touch to about 30, make my brush a little bit bigger. There we go. Smooth this side out. Use my draw brush to dent in just a touch more. Holding down Control. Smooth this out. So I'm just denting in slightly to change the style of this. So this dent is going to be sort of like a splinter that sticks out a tiny bit. So we need a bit more on here. And just move around. You can see Because I was flat on like that, I couldn't see the shape much. That's why I move around and I can see that I'm sticking out too far. So use the smooth brush, and the smooth brush doesn't affect it much because I'm at a detail level of 30, which is reasonably high. So remember to go down detail levels if you need to. So at this point though, I'm happy with it and I can go back up to 40. Get the crease brush up, hold control to sort of pinch it out. And there you can see a sort of splintery look there, which sort of works, although it's a bit blobby around this side. I'm just going to smooth that down a bit, see what that looks like. Might even use the flatten brush, so I'm introducing a new brush. This sort of flattens areas out, so you can see if I paint across here and then move around, it's flattening it out. Slightly bigger brush. Paint there and flatten it out, and you can see that's used for hard surface modeling. But that's all I'm going to do with that one, just for now. And there we go, there's our sort of splinter bit that sticks out there. I might do one down here as well, actually, with the same technique. So dig in there, and get my draw brush, and dig in this side, pull out this side slightly, and just look and see what we've done. We've created quite a mess, but I can smarten this up a bit with the smooth brush. Remember, I'm quite a high detail level. I'm trying to do it without going down this time, but I might have to. And smarten up my creases. Okay, so I didn't do that well with that one. It's because I'm on too high detail. Hopefully that's a good example of why you need to go down a level sometimes. So let's get my draw brush back, dig into this shape a touch. I'm going to dig in just a touch here as well. I'm going to paint on this area slightly. That will change the topology for me, and then I can smooth out a bit easier. So because I've painted on it, it changes it down to 25, and then it's easier to smooth out. It's working a bit better now. Holding down control. Get that pinch brush working. If you go really small with the pinch brush, like I accidentally did then, it hardly does anything, so depending on the detail level you're on. So just bear that in mind. Especially as I've got it on quite a low strength at the moment. Okay, let's take it back up to 40. I think maybe in some ways I did go a bit too high. Because I'm trying to keep this to 2 detail levels because I don't want to bore people, I might have gone too high with 40 to start off with. That doesn't look as crisp as the other one, as you can see, so I've got to crisp up those edges, and to do that, hold down control, get that pinch brush working. Let's smooth out a bit there as well. Press Alt F, remember, to center around your object. Yeah, that's looking a bit better now. With the crease brush, the bigger the brush, it does seem to affect its strength a touch as well. Certainly affects its influence. There we go, that's looking a bit sharper now and like a proper splinter, or whatever that thing is. This end looks nice, but this end is still a touch blobby, so I'm going to go in there. Alt F, remember, to recenter. Mainly holding down control to sort of pinch it like this. I'm changing the brush sizes as well, just to get those finer details in. That's looking a bit better now. Might change this a tiny bit and make them deeper grooves. That's quite nice. Just smoothing out a bit there. And this knot as well. You have to be a bit careful. If I'm using this as a game asset, the more character you give it, the more you're going to notice that it's being duplicated. So if we want to use this several times over, we're going to really notice it if it's got more character. If you're going to use lots of these blanks, make this fairly uniform, then it's not noticeable. Or create several examples of this. I've got 4 now, so I can use a different plank each time, and then it doesn't look so uniform. Now I'm noticing this bit looks a bit strange because it's not got a dent, so I'm going to have to go in and change that. And I'm just going to dig into this. I'm going to put the detail level down, right down, and dig further in. Smooth it out a touch, that's better. and back up to 40. I don't usually go up and down the detail as much this. That suggests that I got it wrong in the first place, the detail levels that I went to. Now, what I've done a nice detailed job, I think, on this side, and at some point I turned symmetry off, and I can't remember when. So all I need to do at this point is go down, and I need to change the direction. Let's just have a look. Positive Z, if I look down in the corner here, I can see positive Z is upwards here, and negative Z is downwards here. So I want to go from this side, positive, to this side, negative. So let's change that to positive Z to negative Z, and then symmetrize. We shouldn't see the top change, but now we can see that the bottom is the same, and I'll turn symmetry back on. I do that fairly regularly. You might not do it as much as me because you may not be as forgetful, but it's worth bearing that in mind. Okay, I'm happy with the shape on the top and the bottom, so actually I'm going to turn symmetry off now and do the edges and sides. So let's come in here, and with our crease brush, smarten up the edges, pinching it. Be a bit careful not to make it too lumpy and sticking out. I need to press Alt F, don't I? Alt F to center, so it doesn't stick out on the edges there too much. There's a lot we can get away with here, to be fair, because it's organic. Hard surfaces, you have to be a lot more careful. Right, let's start working on these sides now. Bit of grain, bit of pinch. Alt F to recenter, especially with a long thin object like this. You need to recenter quite a lot. I'm going to turn symmetry back on here and just smarten that up a bit, smooth that bit out, sharpen this bit up, and off again. And let's have a look at this end. Alt F, remember? The reason I leave the non-symmetry bits till last is in case I need to symmetrize the whole mesh again. Any non-symmetry bits would be lost if I symmetrize. So if we leave those to last, we should be fairly safe. So there we have it. We've got our detail level to a comfortable position. We've got a nice plank of wood ready to bake out our textures in the next session. And we'll be baking out a cavity, an ambient occlusion, and normal maps, and we'll be decimating this to a low poly version with very basic retopology. I hope you're enjoying this series, and if you have any comments, then please let me know. Any advice, please let me know as well, and thanks for watching.